So today is Josh number 5 call. The co-host. Yeah, hi Tarab. Nice to see you at last too as well. Cool. Today's Josh number 5 call. So chat is being co-hosted by Darren Berger. Thank you, Darren, for coming.
Yeah.
Darren works for an executive recruiting firm or search firm called Farber Group, based out of Toronto, Canada. Darren's been there for a while. And before that, Darren worked with some of Canada's largest companies. Farber Group is based in Toronto and in executive positions. And then he switched over to them, as we said, more recently. And so it's going to be interesting to hear about that career change. So many people, whether they want to or not, have to make career changes every so often. And it's usually challenging the older you are. But Darren has a really interesting story to tell about that. So we're gonna talk about career change in general, starting off with Darren's story, and again, just welcoming on the call Sarah. Welcome back. You were here last week, and Turab, really cool to have you again. I'm just gonna try to keep my eyes on the panel here to see if anyone else comes along, so I can welcome people in. And so yeah, again, Darren, thanks for coming in, and of course. How could I not say that Darren and I are such old friends that we don't even remember when we met. It was some point before before nursery school. Yeah, so pretty much our entire lives we've known each other, which is really, really cool that we can come around here together. Yeah. So yeah, awesome, Darren, to have you on this call. And before we get into it, I'll leave it open as I usually do it. I open the floor right away. Does anyone have a question? Sarah, Turab, any question? Nothing? All right. Well, then I'll start things off. So Darren, let's hear your career change story, and then I'm sure that'll lead off into all sorts of interesting tangents.
Yeah. So, well, Sarah, Turab, it's nice to meet you. I don't see your faces on the screen yet, but hopefully you guys may want to join from videos. It's always nice to be able to put a face to the name. But whatever Jacob says is not true, so that's fine. But he's known me long enough that he can.
Turab says thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So just yeah, I mean, like Jacob said, I went through a career change about 2.5 years ago, and Jacob was a huge help navigating through that. And we talked a little bit more because going into recruiting, it's not just the career change, it's also a little bit of a functional change, and it also means that you're shifting from very different backgrounds. So my background is as a chartered accountant in Toronto. Moving into what is almost essentially a business development role more than anything else. I mean, that's really what the essence of a recruiter is. But so, there's a lot of discussions about how the business model works, what his thoughts were. So he was extremely helpful. I'm sure you guys have had the chance to talk with Jacob, and he's hopefully shared some great advice with you along the way, and I really appreciate it. So to be back full circle with Jacob in this capacity and be able to share, he was on a virtual networking session I hosted this morning, so it was great to have him there and his insights. But in terms of the reason of how I made the change and why I made the change, I think, and we don't have a lot of time. I'm happy to go into more depth about it. If anyone's interested in that element of actually moving to career search, that's one element, or just how to make a change. The real trick is really understanding what you're getting to, having the right circle around you, and really then honing in and really being targeted of what you want to change. So for me, it was going into search. The reason why I did it is because I love to be able to help people through challenging environments. So helping clients through analysis and helping them with the management, consulting, and strategic aspects, especially on the talent side. And then also from my time as a business leader is mentoring, leading, developing teams. I've always enjoyed that element, the actual human element to it more than the actual finance or accounting side. So this was a great blend for me. And Jacob even recalls some of the discussions we had was how would you go about the search? Who would you target? How do you get all the information you can? So it was, making a list of all the companies that I want to work for, talk to the higher end exec search firms, and then also the contingency firms as well too. So I understood the marketplace. I understood their business business models. I got to learn the key players and what the environment that I would be best suited with. So for me, that was the key. I think as we move along in our careers as well too, it becomes a lot more important of who you're working with on a daily basis, so much more so than what you're doing yourself, because people around you make a big difference, and the companies that you work for, their values and where you're going to be spending 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day is extremely important. So I think those were the key elements that I was looking for when I was making my career change.
I just want to say a quick welcome to Nigel. Nigel, I think it's the third time you've been back, which is great. Nigel's over in the UK, Chester, I think. And welcome to Rich. Very cool. So yeah, Darren, that's I remember obviously the discussions we had, and it's always a challenge. It's always a challenge, and no different. When you started, I mean, I may ask you a question I know the answer to, but
yeah,
but
that's okay.
Right. But when you first decided that you wanted to change into that direction, what really attracted you to it? Like really what made, I mean, you talked about business development and things that you that are a good fit and all that, but like when was there like a click, like, okay, this is really what I want to do?
It was probably a click about 4 or 5 years before I even got into this, when I was in transition. I was working for a large retailer in Canada. Some of you may know it from the US as well too. So Sears US, but there was the Canadian arm, which was a separate entity. It was called Sears Canada. It was probably the second largest, if not the largest retailer in Canada at the time. And so I was in transition between them before joining one of Canada's largest telecom companies. And I met with a recruiter, and we were chatting, and she had just started at her firm where she was, and she looked at me and she goes, "I think you'd be really good at search. Have you ever thought about doing this and coming into this?" And I thought she was absolutely crazy. And I told her that. I said she was nuts. There's no way I was going to do it. It's not the right time, whatever else. And then he turned around 5 years later, and she's now my boss. So, go figure. So I think that's exactly how kind of it started. But that just planted a seed for me to say, okay, maybe there's more things that I could do out there. I don't just need to be an accountant, a finance person, focus on Excel sheets and forecasts and, strategic plans. So I think really for me, what it also became was, as I got further in my career, it was becoming extremely political at the large organizations that I work for. These companies were struggling to grow the top line. They were doing okay on the bottom line, but that was just from cost-cutting initiatives, doing more with less people. So everyone was being taxed more every time someone left the company or there was a restructuring. You never got the opportunity to hire again for that box. The box just disappeared on your org chart. I think that's when it really came down to me that I was like, I really have to look to do something that I could eventually do for myself. That, if everything comes to almost like an Armageddon or the whole world falls apart, then at least I have something pop. Like, I didn't want to allude to that, but kind of a little bit like COVID. Like, if worse comes to worse, can I then do something for myself? And so, I understand some of the challenges with making a executive search or recruitment into a business, because it's you who is the real driver, the engine. It's not fully scalable until you can get to larger, but it was still something I could always do myself. I could hang a shingle on my door, and I liked it a lot more than doing accounting. I think that's why I made the switch. I wanted to drive a lot more of my destiny than have it kind of just being on the back end of things. Yeah.
No, I think it's really cool, that story about how she planted the seed and then she completely picked the fruit off that tree later on. It's a cool story. And I think it emphasizes a point that I usually tell people when they start off their job search, regardless of whether they want to change direction or keep going in the same direction, is think back to people that you've met that have said to you, "I would love to work with you again," people that you may have worked for with whom you had terrific results, and that they'll immediately recognize that you were someone great that they would want to have on their team. And those are the first people you should reach out to. And so, yeah, it's clearly you followed up on that. Otherwise, I don't know how you would have come around to her.
No, but I mean, you have to ask her if she's happy with that decision, and so that's the other thing.
That's a good point. Well,
you could have asked her. I think you were in a room with her, in a breakout room with her today. But no, it's worked well. I think for me the key was, and to elaborate on that a little bit more, there's a lot of search firms out there, especially in Toronto and everywhere else. So you have this huge opportunity, and it's an easy entrance. A lot of people are saying, come in, you're working on a different compensation structure. It's a lot more weighted to your success. So from that perspective, a lot of companies are willing to take an opportunity, give you a chance, because they're, from a salary perspective, it's they're not tied in if things don't work out and whatever else. And it's a lot of you to generate your own business. So it was very easy to do that. But it's really kind of important to choose where to go, because I talked to maybe about 15 to 20 different companies before I made my decision that Farber was the right place to go. So, and for me, it was more about values and being with the right people than necessarily would have been maybe the largest, best name company. Some might have been even more lucrative than others, but this was the best place for me to kind of take my career to that next level. What happens in 5 years from now, I don't know. Right. But at least for now, I know that I made the right decision, hands down, for now. So I guess I got lucky from that perspective.
How long was the job search? It was a few months, right? It wasn't an overnight success.
Yeah, no, it was not. It
takes time. Takes time.
I probably left Bell Media, I think, at the middle of November of 2017, and I think I started March 12th of 2018. So it was a good 5.5, 6 months.
Right. Yeah. And do you think that if because again, this was a career change, right? You weren't coming from search. Do you think that affected the length of the job search? Or do you think it would have been shorter if you had been going from search to from a recruiter firm to another recruiter firm?
Yeah, it's a great question. Unless you're really in one of the most highly sought after, demanded jobs or careers. I can think of maybe pre-COVID, it was probably anyone doing development and almost any SaaS-based cloud computing. They're struggling for that. People getting really heavy into data analytics, BI, AI, machine learning. I think other than that, if you're a senior executive or you're the upper echelons, I think it would have taken at least probably 4 to 6 months for you to find the right opportunity. We're usually telling people it's probably even longer. If you're even more senior and you have 25, 30 years behind you, you're probably looking at 6 to 9 months. And I think it's not so much of the opportunities that you be able to generate yourself. Yeah. Everyone's different and people focus differently on their search and how they go about it. But if you're really doing quote unquote the right things, I still think it would be at least the 6 to 9 month, and mostly because you want to choose the right place, because a lot of people at the level have gone through transitions before. They've been into environments that they didn't like. They thought the company was going one way when they were interviewing. It's a complete opposite once they get in there. So I think people were being a little bit more selective and really waiting for the right opportunities as opposed to jumping. So most people we talk to are probably on a 6 to 9 month transition. COVID, I think it's going to be a little bit longer. So I would add at least another 2 to 3 months. So it's hard to say that, and I don't want to tell people that. But I think the reality is at least in Canada, I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but we have not turned the taps back on at all. Schools aren't back in where I am in Toronto until May 31st. Mm-hmm. So parents are going to have to be home. So even if they open up all the economy, 30 to 40% of the workforce isn't productive anyways, because one parent, if not two, are at home sharing the duties. So, yeah.
All right, I have a follow-up question, but just in case anyone else wants to, you can step in whenever you want, ask a question on the video or in the chat, go right ahead. So with you guys at Farber, your clients, your recruiting firms, your clients are companies who are trying to find people, right? But as I saw today, you clearly are very, very proactive in nurturing potential candidates for the positions you're ultimately trying to help companies fill. So you're kind of working both sides of the table in a way, very much so actually. And so when you have, with the idea of career transition or career change in the back of our minds here, do you see candidates coming along and you have on the other side companies that are trying to fill positions? Do you ever suggest that one or the other kind of bend towards the first? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it's a very slippery slope in that regard, in certain instances. What we do, and this maybe hopefully is the same for a lot of search firms, and if it isn't, then I highly suggest not partnering with them. I think especially if you're more senior and you're executive level or leadership level, you really want to partner with an executive recruiter or executive search firm, especially the retained ones, because the retained ones means that they're not out there just looking for handing the client, 5 or 10 resumes saying, here are some great opportunity, here's some great people we know, have a look and whatever. We offer a much more consultative process. We spend hours with our client understanding the right fit, what the role is, writing job descriptions, assessing the market, and then going broad. So in that regard, on a retained search, it's very, very different because we're partnering with it. What I would tell most, and I'm an absolute true believer that it's got to be a win-win situation. So the minute the candidate, and before COVID, it was a very candidate-focused market. So you're talking to candidates very, very differently because a lot of them have good opportunities. A lot of them are in different processes. They're getting sought after from multiple companies. We would never put one candidate in more than one opportunity as well. I think that's very important as a candidate. You want to make sure that your company that you're working with is not going to do that, because otherwise then you don't know if you're being best served in that way at all. Because if a recruiter is putting you into two different searches, one might be a different price point, one might be a different outcome for them. You just have to be very cautious. We don't do that. We would only do that once one process ends with a candidate, and we could say, okay, this one didn't work out well for you, but this one, we have this opportunity and happy to present that if you think that's the right way. So I think from that side, we're not really trying to have a company bend. We're just, or a candidate bend. We're trying to create a win-win outcome. And that means if the candidate's happy, the client's going to be happy. If the client's happy, most likely the candidate's going to be happy. But again, I think the tides are shifting a little bit now, or they will shift, where companies are now going to be able to have a little bit more opportunity to choose from different candidates, whereas before there was maybe a little bit less of a selection pool because candidates were getting torn in so many ways. And the
buyer's
good ones,
market.
Yeah, it was a buyer. Right now, from a candidate side, it was a buyer's market. I think now it might be a company side to be a buyer's market. And there was also retention. Candidates were also determining when to say. I also tell people, if they're in a good opportunity, the grass is not greener on the other side. Making a change just to make a change is not the right move at all to make. I've done that in my career in the past, and it hasn't been the right move at all. Just because one company looks like it's doing things better, not necessarily. It might be just a different shade of green, and that's something you have to decide whether you like that or not. So.
Cool. So, okay, so Turab has sent in a question here over the chat. He says, what are the avenues to explore when the traditional approach is a dead end? For example, I always wanted to get into advertising as a copywriter, but the career path took me into sales and marketing / business development.
So, and I guess, Turab, it's hard because we're not conversing. I'd love to ask you a couple other questions in that. When you say it's a dead end, is it a dead end because you felt like you've explored all of the opportunities, the 5, 6, 7, 8 times you've kind of gone down that path, the door's just been absolutely closed in your face? People in the industry have told you that it won't work. It's hard to tell. I'm a fond believer that really you could a lot of the times try and drive your own reality. So it means that you're able to kind of create it, especially if you're coming from a sales and marketing background, business development. You understand the tools that you need to be able to kind of tell the story and know what your skill sets are, that you'd be able to demonstrate them. So, if I think from copywriting or advertising, or wanting to get into advertising as a copywriter, a very different skill set, obviously, from sales and marketing. So what makes you a great copywriter? What do you have all the skill sets? Have you trained in it before? Or is this a brand new, road that you're going down? So a couple questions. It's hard, I think, for me to answer. Jake, maybe referring to what David asked the question today, what happens when you kind of down, I think it's similar to that question that he says, what happens if you go down market in your career, right? Like if you're at an executive level and you want to get very tactical, and sounds like he was a computer or software engineer or whatnot, and he wanted to get out of the management strategy and he just wanted to get into the development side. And I think you asked him, like, why would you necessarily do that, right? Like, have you been challenged in that way? So I think it's a very similar question. That is that what's driving you to do that, and what have you experienced kind of now in that kind of format?
Yeah. So he says that this was after I finished my MBA some 19 years ago. So how was it a dead end? Like, what happened? I mean, obviously, if you mean a dead end, I'm assuming you tried and you weren't getting hired. But what convince you that there was nothing you could do that would ever change things, type of thing. That's what I'd be curious to hear. Because, like, I mean, as Darren was saying, there are some professions that are a lot more easier to demonstrate. Although you mentioned 19 years ago, so things were different back then. But nowadays, there are certain things that are a lot more easier to demonstrate your expertise than, here he says, I was in a place where the opportunities were non-existent. Yeah. Nowadays, if someone was trying to get into, I mean, and maybe you want to try again, if you're trying to get into advertising as a copywriter, well, I mean, I know, for example, on JobMob, as a fan of creative advertising in general, I've posted a number of articles with roundups of job search ads that I thought were super creative, and you really see how brilliant people can be with the wording or the graphic design of these ads. And one of the things that I think people can identify with is I have a poll on these articles where I ask people, would you want to work for this? Well, let's put it this way. I don't remember the exact question, but basically it's along the lines of, when you see a company puts out a creative ad campaign like that, a recruiting ad campaign, does it make you want to work for them more? And I mean, of course, it must be something like 87% or 90% of people who have responded, they say yes. And so if you see, if you're an aspiring, no matter what age you are, if you're an aspiring copywriter, then you can look at ads for companies that you want to work for after researching those companies and say, I can do it better. And you can send them, you say, okay, you guys just put out this ad campaign. This is what I would have done for you. And you just make them want to have you. It's as simple as that. And nowadays, there's so many platforms, whether it's video, audio, blogging for text, and et cetera. There's so many ways of demonstrating your expertise. Whereas 19 years ago, when you said it was a dead end, Turab, it was very different, very different.
Yeah, I think the world's changing. We talk about this. We do a lot of what's called interim work or fractional work. So interim work would be a 3-month contract, 4-month contract, 6-month, 12-month, whatever it is. Could be covering a mat leave, a parental leave, so on, a sick leave, whatever else. We also do fractional, where it's 1 day a week, couple hours a month, whatever it is as well too. But there's a whole term, and Europe is much bigger for this. So if there's people, I guess the audience might be from, you mentioned the UK, maybe someone from Israel, whatever else, mostly in Europe, they've been on this interim/gig economy for a lot longer than they have in North America. So, Turab, if that's something that you think you have the skill sets for, take a project, maybe cut it low from a fee perspective, offer it as almost like an apprenticeship, in the sense that you'll do it for free and you can see what someone gets. Then you could build up a book and you could build up a portfolio of this. And then as you start doing that, you may even realize that you just created your own job yourself. So I think, if you're making that career change, I think that's a really good way is this what we call try before you buy. And it goes both ways for a candidate or for a client as well too.
Yeah, he says, thanks, Darren. Thanks for all the answers.
Yeah. No
and I love that idea. I love that people can, like you said, they can literally create their own job, almost like their own dream job, by compiling these freelance projects. And so oftentimes, especially when it's a downtime like now, so companies, they need work done, but they can't afford to have someone doing it full time. And so they'll get someone on like a roster who's doing it part time. And then when things get better, hopefully they do get better, It's okay, now we can afford to, let's bring you on full time. And so Sarah here says, she says, Turab, you can also offer your services on Upwork to get experience. Yeah. Upwork is the biggest freelance marketplace in the world right now. But yeah, there are a number also, and I also have a roundup article with many, many different kinds of freelance marketplaces where you can go and get projects. Absolutely. Yeah.
GLG is another one as well too. I don't know if you heard of GLG out of the US. I think they maybe international. They're big as well too. So.
Turab says, thanks, Sarah. I don't know if you guys, am I the only one who could see the messages going back and forth?
No, we can see them.
Okay, cool. All right, well, then I'm going to stop quoting. Right. No, I'm actually not familiar with GLG. I'm going to look into that. Yeah. Is it specifically a freelance marketplace, or is it more like
they basically tap you as an expert and say, like, I haven't done it yet, but I know someone who has, and they contacted him. We had a you'll be aware of this, the 407, Jake. It's a toll road. So someone was looking to get some experience on toll roads in Canada. So they reached out to him as an expert. He happened to be in transition. I think he made $500, $1,000, $1,500, whatever it was, for a couple hours worth of work. And he just talked to them about the market. He didn't even have to give them any insights in the company that he worked for ahead of time. He just gave them insights. If you were coming to Canada and you want to build a toll road, these are the challenges you'd have to think of. These are the benefits. And slowly, you do enough of those and you become an expert in the field. So It's interesting.
Okay, so another question. We, as Darren mentioned earlier, we were on a call together earlier today. There were over 40 people on that call, and so I heard some of the things, obviously, that were being said. But I think it's interesting to bring them up here. What kinds of things are you telling candidates now and companies now that you wouldn't have been telling them pre-COVID?
Yeah, I think what the real thing is really understanding why. A couple of things. Like I just placed a CFO last week, so he's resigned. Like he hasn't even met with the people yet. He's only met them virtually, which may sound odd for some people in different parts of the world because that's really the way it's worked for still North America. It's still slow. This COVID has accelerated all that. But he was hired remotely or virtually, accepted virtually, and resigned virtually as well too. And he's going to be onboarded virtually. So he's going through the whole gamut of it. So the real thing for what I was telling the candidate was, let's just make sure this is the right thing. Like my whole, once we got to COVID, I wasn't not honest with him, but we were asking very different questions. Are you prepared to leave where you are now? Like, is it the right? Because I'd hate for him to leave and then have regrets later on. So we covered all that off, and he was okay with it. So we proceeded. And then on the flip side, it was asking the client, like, are you okay? Like, are you hiring this person? You're taking him away from a job that he has that he's probably going to be okay with. Like, are you guys okay? Are you going to be financially okay? Those are things we didn't really have to probably get into as much. Like, how are you going to onboard him? How are you going to work through this? How are we going to present the offer? Like, all these things are very, very different now than we were before. So I think from that's one aspect of it. I think the other conversations we're having with a lot of our clients are one, because of the work we do at Farber. We're business advisory. We have corporate finance. We have M&A. We have business financing as well. We can help in we do a whole bunch of restructuring work and consulting work. We can have the conversations about what they're doing for their business, triaging it. And then once they realize they're triaging it, what's the right search? Is it a full-time search? Is it an interim search? Is it a fractional search? And that's where a lot of our focus on with companies right now is really understanding. It's slower for sure. It's slower. Like we were really, really busy running up until March. We've carried a bit over into April, but I think we're expecting that we're just going to be slower. Companies here in North America are a little bit slower to reacting. Yeah. What's going on in the US, if you followed it at all, it's a little bit unprecedented, and they're so divided, and it's very different than the way that I think the rest of the countries around the world have tackled this. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Canada is so tied to the US that we're also piggybacking there. So I think it's just so much waiting period here. The government still has to give out a lot of money, so companies aren't sure what they're doing. So I think it's just in this another 2 to 3 weeks of waiting, and then we'll really see if it's really going to be a long-term slide or if there's going to be an uptick. So I think that's a lot of the conversations we're having with people these days.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the call. So anybody who's on still, feel free to throw in a last question. In the meantime, I just want to come back to something you just mentioned. In Josh number 3 a few weeks ago, I spoke with someone by the name of Irene Marshall, and she's a job search coach as well, based in San Francisco. And she talked about virtual onboarding and how she was wondering if this is something that recruiters are going to do a lot more than they've done in the past. Like, would you want to work for a place that you've never actually been in their offices? And so you're saying this is... Yes, I mean, people are not. It's not stopping people. No. You're taking different steps than you would have in the past. And so we talked about maybe recruiters, or whether they're in-house or external, maybe they'll have some sort of a welcome video touring the offices that can just be sent out to any candidates, even posted on the websites. This is what you can expect coming in. Have you guys been seeing anything like that? Any extra information posted that normally companies in the past never felt the need to divulge?
Yeah, I think you'll very quickly know that you've made the right decision, the company that you choose to go to, based on what they do over how they onboard now, which is different with virtual, and how they've treated you and the lengths that they've gone to. Have they said that the computer will come on time to the shipping? All of that. So I think that's really important from that perspective. We have 2 articles that we've written. A colleague of mine wrote an article on onboarding virtually. So I'll share that with you, and has some really good information of what companies can do and how candidates can do it. And then I wrote an article of why people would want to make a change even during COVID time. So I think when you couple those 2 together, I think you get some really good information. But we're talking about onboarding. I think companies just understand this is the new normal. If they want good talent and they have to bring them on now, then they're going to do the right things to bring them in and figure it out. And I think it's a give and take on both. I don't think you should fully judge the company that you're going into. I think some might do it a little bit better than others, but I think you just, I think companies are just understanding how they can do this and make it move forward. So
and then you want to reduce the risk, right? You want to, you don't want any surprises. You don't want to discover, like you were saying earlier in the call, that you join somewhere and then 2 weeks later you find out, oh no, this is not going to be a good fit, or even 2 months later, even worse. So so wait, so there's just one last question from Sarah. Kind of a funny question. What does JOSH stand for? Well, it's actually, technically it's Job Search Online Hangout, so it should be JSO, but it's just easier to say JOSH, so I on purpose bastardized that. So okay, so here we are, we're coming up against 30 minutes here. So there we go. I just want to thank everybody for coming. I especially want to thank my co-host Darren. Very cool, lots of really interesting things to say, cool insights, and I had a lot of fun. And so thank you everyone for coming. The recording will go up on YouTube as soon as I can. I've been spending, we got a week to get things up, which is a long time, but we'll see if I can get it a bit faster this time. Travis says thank you too. Thank you too for coming. Thank everybody for coming, and see you guys next week. I'll be happy to have you back again later.
Thanks so much, Jake. I appreciate the invite. Good luck to everyone, and please feel free to reach out. Jacob could hopefully share my information with you in his posting later on. So
stay safe, everyone.
Take care.
Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.